My friends, thank you so much for joining us for another installment of Little Lab at Home. As always, along with a big thank you again for joining us at 10 a.m., feel free to let us know that you're here. Say hi in the chat and let us know where you're watching from if you'd like to. Today, we are continuing our series of no heat kitchen projects. So we are going to continue to turn your kitchen into a test kitchen. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. But before we get started, can somebody remind me and can somebody let Jennifer and Evie know what we did last week? Does anybody remember what we did last week together in our test kitchens?
They're going to tell us what they did last week.
And if you did join us last week and you do remember, did you have any success? What happened with what you made last week? Oh my goodness.
Somebody said you made bread last week.
So last week, and I can't believe I forgot this because I actually have some flour still on my shirt here. We made sourdough starters. And it looks like a few of y'all were able to get them to start smelling sour 7 days later, which is really, really, really cool. Today, we'll be making another no heat kitchen project, another small project together that y'all will need a little bit of time to allow to develop, just like our sourdough starters. So today, we are talking about another way to ferment food, which is a way of chemically changing some of our food. Now, fermentation, this change of our food, started a really, really, really long time ago. Because let's think about it this way. Let's think about you have a really, really big dinner, but you don't finish your dinner. What do you do with your leftovers? What do you do with the leftover food that you didn't get around to eating?
What do we do with any of our leftovers?
We do get water in the plate.
Oh, we're putting water in here? Yeah. What do
We
we
would
do?
probably, and it looks like lots of folks put them in the fridge. You can save it for later. A long time ago, though, folks didn't have refrigerators to put stuff in. So when they had so much food that they needed to save to eat for later, they didn't have somewhere cold where it wouldn't go bad. So they found themselves in a real pickle. That is pretty funny. I hope everybody at home is laughing at my funny
Yeah,
joke.
I was
Okay,
joke.
so the way that they got around it and preserved their food so that they could eat it later is that they would turn something like this, which is a raw cucumber, into something like this, which is a pickle. And of course, this pickle did not come from a cucumber that looks like this, but you kind of get the point. And they would do that by, like how we made a little home for our sourdough starter last week, we're going to make another type of small home for the types of good living things that can ferment something like this, a fruit or a vegetable, without letting in other things that might make us sick. So last week we did that with some water and some flour. This week we're going to do it with some different ingredients. This week I'll be doing it with something that I had laying around, which was a bunch of baby carrots. Jennifer and Evie, what are y'all going to be pickling today?
Can you pick up one of these and show them what we're pickling today? What is this?
Potato.
It's a
Thank you
potato.
so much. It's a potato. You can pickle just about anything that you've got lying around. I'm also going to give it a try with this.
Yeah.
It's the end of a watermelon. So I'm going to try to pickle. Is it rude for me to speak with my mouth full? Maybe it is. I'm going to pickle the end of this watermelon rind here also. Now to do that, that's a really simple process that also happens to be very scientific and also happens to be a whole lot of fun. So that we can go ahead and get started, I am going to switch my camera over to Experiment Cam. Everybody ready?
Ooh, look at what Max is doing with his camera.
Okay, welcome to Experiment Cam, my friends. Can you see my hands okay? And you can see my carrots okay? And I don't need this cucumber. A lot of people like turning cucumbers into pickles, and that's a really fun process. We're not going to be doing that today because one nice thing about pickling is that you don't really need to cook, and you also don't need to cut. So it is a really nice kid-friendly kitchen activity. Now for this, I'll be using a ball jar, which is a nice jar that has a lid that you can screw on to the top, which makes this really nice. Today's project is going to be a quick pickling project, and it's also a pickling project that you can put into your fridge later on and try out really only in a few hours to a few days. We're not recommending that you keep these for a really long time like folks did back in the past. The very first thing that we need to do to make our little home for these little things that are going to help us ferment our food is we're going to fill one of these up all the way with water. So I've got a bowl of water here. And I'm going to start small with my spoon. And I'm going to start filling it up.
Or mine? Do you want to pour that?
And let's try it with this. Now, one thing about ball jars is that they are not quite 2 whole cups. So it's going to take a little bit longer to figure out exactly how much water we need to put in. And for parents, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a little bit of intuitive math, which is a great, important process for figuring out math with young children. I have this whole ball jar all the way filled up. You can see it's all the way filled up with water there. Can you all see that on my experiment cam?
Yeah.
Most excellent. So this is all the way filled up with water. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to do some really basic ratios, some really basic math. The way to do this is I'm going to try to get it so that it's equal amounts water and air in my cup. So I'm going to start pouring it out.
Okay. So we need, you ready? So
And I can also do that by using my spoon again if I want to be really careful.
So what should we go?
And let's try another one.
Is that, we need to get it way down here. So should we pour more out?
Oh my goodness, and that's taking a little bit of time too. So let's keep pouring it out. Do I have it at halfway air and halfway water yet? It doesn't look like it, does it? So let's keep trying.
It's not feel higher.
And pouring is another really important gross motor skill for young children to start building.
Oh no, that's too much. Can you pour some back in?
Oh my goodness. All right, take a look at this, my friends. To me, it looks like I've got about halfway water and halfway air, which is great. Really good. Okay, so now that I've got my halfway water, what we're going to do is we're going to start making what's called a brine. And a brine means that we're going to add salt. So I've got some salt here. Mine is non-iodized, which is really the best type to use for something like this. And for this, we're going to try doing another measuring skill. So last week, we learned a little bit about using one of these. Does anybody remember the best way to use one of our measuring spoons when you're measuring a powder like salt? If you do remember, then you might remember that what we're going to do is we're going to do it over another surface, another bowl. We're going to pour, and we're going to pour until there's too much in here. Do you see that I have too much salt in there? It goes all the way over the top. All that I want is so that it goes level with the top. So what can I do to get rid of this extra salt that is on here?
Right here.
What can I do with this extra salt? You can take your finger and you can swipe it off so that you've got a level amount of salt here. Does everybody see how I did that? So you're going to swipe it so that your salt is just there up at the top.
Can you pour it in?
And then we're going to add that. You want about 1 tablespoon, which is a pretty good amount of salt. If you don't have a tablespoon, you can do that measurement also with teaspoons. But you just really want a whole lot of salt that you can add to this water. So we're going to pour it in. Now that it's poured in, though, let's take a look at it. Does that look mixed? It doesn't really look mixed to me. Does it look mixed to you, Jennifer and Evie?
Not so much. I think it could be mixed a little bit better. What do you think, Evie? Should we mix it some more? Yeah, are we mixing ours?
Let's mix ours. And mixing, creating a solution, which is a mixture of a solid and a liquid or a few different components, means that we've got to mix. So let's mix. And let's mix pretty vigorously, and that means to mix pretty fast. But then we can mix kind of slowly. And let's mix kind of fast again. Okay, so I've got a nice mixture of salt and water here. And now when I look at it, it looks kind of cloudy. Does it look kind of cloudy to y'all? But it looks mixed in. There's not as much solid salt just floating around in it. Okay, now to finish off our brine, we're not going to go all the way to the top again because we have to add our solid ingredients also. So instead, we're going to take our other ingredient, which is vinegar, and we're using white vinegar. You can also use rice vinegar. It's not as recommended using concentrated vinegars like balsamic, but white ought to work just fine. And we're going to finish making our brine mixture, this home for our nice little living things that will help us to mix or help us to create a little home for those things. And we're going to add some to a spoon. We'll pour that in and we'll give that a mix. Let's try it again with a smaller spoon. And we'll give that a mix. And we're just going to keep adding and keep mixing up our brine. I've got another type of measuring equipment here. We're going to keep adding until instead of being halfway mixed of salt water and air, it's going to be about halfway between salt water and vinegar. And we don't want to go all the way until the top. So you'll have to kind of eyeball it a little bit. When it looks like there's just a little bit of air left in, that's when you've got your mixture. Now, something kind of confusing here, Jennifer and Evie, is that our salt water, when it's mixed together, and our vinegar kind of look the same. But like how our salt water wasn't immediately mixed, these two probably could use a little bit of mixing too. Are y'all ready to mix? All right, let's mix them. So we're gonna mix kind of vigorously, and we're gonna stir, and we're gonna continue making our solution so that there's a nice mixture of salt water and vinegar.
Mixing. What do you think we're gonna add in next?
All right. How do y'all feel? Are yours nicely mixed? Mine feels pretty nicely mixed up.
Mixed to you? Yeah, I think so too.
I think I can't reach.
Oh, okay.
Our last step, are y'all ready, is to add our solid ingredients, which for me is my baby carrots. So this is whatever it is that we're trying to pickle. Now we're going to put it into this nice little home here, and all you have to do is just plop them in.
Plop.
I'm plopping mine in one at a time because I think it's kind of fun that way. But you don't want to make it so that it goes all the way over the lid of the jar. So I don't want to add tons. It looks pretty good to me. I think I've got a pretty good amount in there. Now there is another ingredient. That last ingredient that we have that you really, really need to make these pickles. Do you know what it is, Evie?
What is the last ingredient? What do you think?
It's thyme. And I don't mean time like the spice. I mean time like an amount of time. This needs to sit and wait for a little while. Just like our sourdough starters, this also needs a little bit of time so that it can develop, so that those little living things that are going to ferment and change it chemically have some time to do their job. And what we've done by adding salt, water, and vinegar is we've made it so that nothing else that might make us sick can get into it. So the last thing that I can do, now that this is pretty much ready to go, is I can put a lid on top. But there's something else really fun that you can do also. And for that, I'm going to switch back over to my regular camera. Evie and Jennifer, how's it going out there?
Ooh, how's it going?
It's getting some. The potatoes are in there, but the water's too much.
There's too much water. You could always get some of it out. Your brine mixture might need to get poured out a little bit. And you can do that using a spoon too. You can gently dip your spoon in and move it out. I might do that too. Because Evie, I'm the same way. I added a little bit too many carrots to my brine. The very last thing that you can do is you can add other spices. You can make this your own project. And there are so many different spices now that you know how to make a simple brine that you can add to make this something that tastes delicious to you. Now that we've made our brine, we get to decide what else goes into it. So that might be black pepper. I'll add a little bit of that. That might be a little bit of fennel. I might add some of that in here. You can add other things like chili flakes or mustard. I'm going to add some kelp, which is seagrass. And then once you've done that, gently this time, because there's so much in here, I'm going to stir it really, really, really gently, which also helps to build fine and gross motor skills. So far, we've done some intuitive math. We've talked a little bit about how something becomes more than the sum of its ingredients. We've done a really simple biochemistry project by starting a fermentation project. You know what our last step is? It's gonna be patience. We've made use of some cooking and some scientific processes. One last scientific process that we've got to make use of now is patience, is waiting. So we are now going to wait to watch and see what happens to these. Now, luckily for us, this type of very simple pickling project doesn't take that much time. You can actually open this back up out of your fridge and probably take a bite out of them in 12 hours or so. So maybe tomorrow morning or really late tonight if you're allowed to stay up that late, which I know I'll be asleep in 12 hours. But we would recommend, again, that this type of simple pickling project not be the kind that you keep for a really, really, really long time. So parents, this is a great introduction to pickling together. You see that aside from every once in a while breaking a little bit of glass, which you need to be super careful of, which I could have been more careful of today. But aside from the little kitchen mishap, which happens here and there, this is a pretty simple process, and you can continue this process and make it your own, make it custom together. You can try blanching your carrots or gently boiling them before. You can try it with potatoes like Jennifer and Evie made. You can try it with watermelon rind, which is my next project, is going to be pickling this thing using the same process. And you can try all sorts of other wacky spices that you might want to put in there to see what types of cool creations you can make. But parents, remember that any time that you have any concerns over whether or not you should eat something, it's always better to aim on the cautious side and not eat it. This will probably be good for a few days, after which you should either eat it or go ahead and toss it. We do not recommend you keep this for a super long time. Jennifer and Evie, how are y'all feeling about your creation over there, your pickled potatoes?
Sugaring.
Oh, we think it looks really cool, Max. And do you think this is gonna be yummy? Do you think Dad's gonna like this? Yeah, we think Dad's gonna like this a lot.
It's really green.
Is that green in there? Those are some of our spices.
Daddy's gonna like the spices.
Daddy's gonna like the spices.
I'm gonna, yeah. I hope that I can try one of those too. That looks really, really good, Evie and
Yeah,
Jennifer.
we can share with Max.
My friends, next week we will be taking on our last no heat kitchen project. So no heat and no knives, no sharp things. Next week we'll be talking about lacto fermentation and we'll be doing some with fruit. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I have more combinations to try. I have some honey, I have my watermelon rinds, and I have plenty more materials to make more brine. So I am going to go ahead and say goodbye to everybody now and hope that you will give your fermentation, your pickling process a try.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Evie. Bye-bye, Jennifer. Thanks for joining me
Thank
today.
you so much. This was so much fun.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us also.